The notification sound cut through the silence of Doris's small room like a knife. Another wedding video, another spectacle, another reminder that in Lagos, your worth as a woman was now measured in how many millions your man could spend in one day. She watched the screen with a mixture of fascination and dread as Clara, her former classmate, twirled in a custom Vera Wang gown that cost more than Doris's father earned in 3 years. The comment section exploded with fire emojis and praise. This is how it's done. If he can't spend 50 million on your wedding, sis, he's not serious. Poor couple should just do court wedding, abeg. Doris closed the app and stared at the ceiling of her one-room apartment in Surulere. Outside, Lagos hummed with its usual chaos: generators, car horns, street vendors hawking their wares. John would be here soon. Sweet, hard-working John, with his modest salary as a junior civil engineer and his big dreams that seemed so far away. They'd been dating for 3 years. He wanted to marry her. She wanted to marry him too. But every time she imagined their wedding, something inside her chest tightened with shame. How could she face her friends? How could she post photos knowing Clara and others would mock her? How could she explain to her mother why there were only 50 guests instead of 500? Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from her mother. Doris, I saw Clara's wedding video. Chai, that is how a real man takes care of his woman. Oh, I hope that your John is planning something serious. You're not getting any younger, and I will not come and carry embarrassment for your father and me. Doris felt tears sting her eyes, even her own mother. The pressure wasn't just external anymore. It had seeped into her bones, into her family's expectations, into her sense of self-worth. She loved John deeply. But in a world that measured love in Naira and Kobo, in viral moments and designer labels, was love ever going to be enough? Across town, in a sleek penthouse apartment in Banana Island, Clara stood before a full-length mirror admiring her reflection. Her new human hair wig, Brazilian, 40 inches, had cost 800,000 naira, worth every kobo. Behind her, Daddy Z, whose real name was Zachariah, but whom everyone called by his street name, scrolled through his phone counting engagement on their wedding posts. 3 million views in 2 days. Blogs had picked it up. They were trending. Perfect. Babe, we need to maintain this momentum, Daddy Z said, his gold Rolex catching the light. I'm thinking we should do a 1-month anniversary shoot. Maybe rent a yacht, get some influencers involved. Clara smiled, that practiced Instagram smile she'd perfected over the years. I love it, but baby, can we also talk about that new Chanel bag I saw, the quilted one? It'll be perfect for the yacht shoot. Daddy Z hesitated for just a fraction of a second, a hesitation Clara didn't notice before nodding. Of course, my queen, nothing is too much for you. That's why I married you. You know quality. What Clara didn't know, what she had never bothered to ask, was where the money actually came from. She'd met Daddy Z at an upscale club in Victoria Island where he was spraying dollars like confetti. He drove a Range Rover Sport, he wore designer everything. He spoke confidently about his businesses and his investment in real estate and crypto. She never asked for details because, frankly, she didn't care. All that mattered was that he could afford her, that he could give her the wedding her friends would envy, that he could maintain the lifestyle she believed she deserved simply by existing. I saw Doris today, Clara said casually, applying another layer of lip gloss. Well, not physically, but her relationship status popped up on my timeline. Apparently, she's engaged to that struggling engineer guy, John something. She laughed, a sound without real joy. I give them 1 year maximum before poverty scatters that love. Daddy Z barely looked up from his phone. Some people just don't have sense. Why marry when you can't afford to live?
John's hands trembled slightly as he slid the small velvet box across the worn wooden table. They were sitting in their usual spot, a modest boka in Yaba, where a plate of rice and stew cost 800 naira, and the owner knew them by name. The evening sun filtered through the plastic curtains, casting golden shadows across Doris's face. She stared at the box, her heart hammering against her ribcage. Doris, John began, his voice steady, despite his nervousness. I know I'm not a rich man. I know I can't give you the kind of wedding you see on Instagram every weekend. I can't rent out Echo Hotel or fly in a celebrity to perform at our reception. My entire savings right now is 2.3 million naira, and most of that needs to go towards securing our apartment and starting our life together." He paused, searching her eyes for any sign of disappointment. "But what I can give you is my whole heart, my dedication, my partnership. I can give you a man who will wake up every day determined to build something real with you, not for the cameras, but for us, for our future children, for the legacy we'll create together." Doris felt hot tears sliding down her cheeks. Everything in her wanted to say yes immediately, but the voices in her head were screaming. Her mother's voice, "Don't let love blind you to poverty." Clara's mocking laughter from countless conversations, "Better to cry in a Range Rover than laugh in a Danfo." The Instagram comments she'd read 1,000 times. If he loved you, he'd find the money. Society had constructed a prison in her mind, and even here, in this beautiful moment, she could feel the bars. "John, she started, her voice breaking. "I love you. God knows I love you. But I'm scared. I'm terrified of what people will say. My mother has already started comparing us to Clara and her husband. My friends, my family, everyone expects something grand, something worth posting. How do I tell them we're having a small wedding? How do I face the mockery?" John reached across the table and took her hands in his. They were calloused from work, strong, real. "Doris, listen to me carefully. Those people who are waiting to mock you, they won't be there at 3 a.m. when our child is sick. They won't be there when we're building our business from scratch. They won't be in the hospital room or the boardroom or any room that actually matters. Their opinions are noise, temporary noise. But what we build together, that's permanent. The question isn't what they'll say. The question is, do you believe in us enough to bet on us instead of on their approval?" Clara scrolled through her phone with the kind of aggressive energy that comes from boredom mixed with superiority. She just posted a photo of her breakfast, pancakes she didn't eat, arranged artfully next to her new Hermes Birkin bag, and the likes were already pouring in. 2,000 in 15 minutes. She smiled with satisfaction. This was power. This was winning. Her phone rang. Private number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mrs. Clara Okonkwo?" "Yes, this is she. Who is this?" "This is Officer Ademola from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. We're calling regarding your husband, Mr. Zachariah Okonkwo, also known as Daddy Z. We need you to come down to our office for questioning regarding some financial transactions linked to your joint accounts." The phone nearly slipped from her freshly manicured fingers. "Excuse me? This must be a mistake. My husband is a legitimate businessman. He has investments. Ma, we'll discuss everything when you come in. We've been monitoring certain activities for the past 8 months. We'd appreciate your cooperation." The line went dead. Clara sat frozen on her Italian leather couch, the same couch they'd bought for 4.5 million naira just 3 months ago, the same couch she'd posted about with the caption, "Only the finest for the Okonkwo household." Her mind raced. EFCC? 8 months of monitoring? What activities? She'd never asked Daddy Z detailed questions about his business. She was too busy enjoying the fruits to examine the roots, too busy spending to question the source. She dialed Daddy Z's number. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. Panic began creeping up her spine like ice water. She opened her banking app, fingers shaking. Their joint account, the one that usually had at least 15 million naira floating in it, showed a balance of 847,000 naira. Impossible! Just last week, there was over 20 million. She refreshed. Same figure. Clara stood up, her breath coming in short gasps. She walked to their bedroom, to Daddy Z's closet, and began searching. Behind his rows of designer shoes, she found something that made her blood run cold. A burner phone. And when she turned it on, messages flooded in. Codes, numbers, instructions, terms she'd heard on crime documentaries but never imagined in her own home. Wire transfer complete, client paid, move the funds before Friday, the Dubai account is clean, use that one. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the floor, her Birkin bag still on her arm, surrounded by luxury that suddenly felt like a beautiful lie wrapped in designer labels.
The EFCC office smelled of old files, stale coffee, and broken dreams. Clara sat in a sterile interrogation room, her Valentino sunglasses perched on her head, a shield she hoped would hide the fear in her eyes. Across from her, Officer Ademola placed a thick folder on the metal table between them. The sound echoed in the small room like a judge's gavel. "Mrs. Okonkwo, do you recognize these transactions?" He slid several printed bank statements toward her. Clara's eyes scanned the numbers. Millions flowing in and out. Accounts she'd never heard of. Companies with names that sounded legitimate but meant nothing to her. "Your husband has been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme for the past 2 years. Over 400 victims. Total fraud estimated at 2.8 billion naira." The number hit her like a physical blow. Billion, with a B. Clara's mouth went dry. I don't know anything about this. I thought he had businesses, real estate, investments in..." Her voice trailed off, because even as she spoke, she realized how hollow it sounded, how willfully blind she'd been. "Ma'am, the law doesn't reward ignorance, especially when you've been a direct beneficiary. That wedding of yours that went viral, the one that cost 85 million naira, was funded by money stolen from a widow in Ibadan who invested her late husband's gratuity. That Birkin bag on your arm right now, bought with funds from a young man who took a loan to invest in your husband's fake crypto platform. He committed suicide 3 weeks ago when he couldn't repay the loan." Clara felt vomit rising in her throat. A suicide, a widow, real people with real lives destroyed while she posed for Instagram. "We're freezing all assets tied to your husband pending investigation," Officer Ademola continued, his voice devoid of sympathy. "The Banana Island apartment, the cars, the jewelry, the accounts, everything. You should also know that several banks have begun proceedings to recover loans your husband took in both your names, loans totaling over 150 million naira." The room spun. Clara gripped the edge of the table. "Loans? In my name? I never signed." "You signed, Mrs. Okonkwo. Multiple documents. Your signatures are on file." He showed her copies, and there they were, her elegant signatures, probably scrolled absent-mindedly while Daddy Z sweet-talked her, telling her it was just paperwork for property acquisitions, investment opportunities. She'd been so trusting, so stupid, so dazzled by the lifestyle that she'd signed away her future without reading a single line. "Where is my husband?" she whispered. "Mr. Okonkwo was arrested this morning at the airport. He was attempting to flee to Dubai with 47 million naira in cash hidden in designer luggage. He's currently in our custody, and I can assure you, Mrs. Okonkwo, he won't be going anywhere for a very long time." Doris said yes. Despite the fear, despite the voices, despite everything society had programmed into her brain, she looked into John's eyes and chose love over luxury. But saying yes in a quiet buka was the easy part. The hard part came when she had to face the world with her decision. Her mother's reaction was exactly what she'd feared. 2.3 million naira for everything? Doris, are you mad? Her mother's voice crackled through the phone speaker loud enough for John, sitting beside Doris in their small apartment, to hear every word. "Clara's husband spent more than that on just her bridal shower. Just the shower, Doris. And you want to do your entire wedding with 2.3 million naira? What will people say? What will I tell my friends at church?" "Mama, it's not about what people will say. It's about starting our marriage on solid ground, not debt." "Solid ground? Doris, listen to yourself. You sound like those poor people who convince themselves that poverty is a virtue. Your father and I didn't suffer to send you to university, so you can marry struggle. This John, what is he even building? Where are his family connections? Where is his investment portfolio?" John gently took the phone from Doris's trembling hands. "Good evening, Ma. This is John. I understand your concerns and I respect them, but I want to assure you that I love your daughter more than my own comfort. I'm asking you to give us a chance to prove that wealth isn't just inherited or borrowed. It's built. Give us 5 years, ma. Just 5 years. If by then we haven't created something substantial, something real, you can say I failed your daughter. But don't judge our future by our wedding budget." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Doris's mother spoke, her voice softer but still skeptical. 5 years, you say. We shall see. But Doris, mark my words, when this poverty begins to bite you, when you are watching your mate enjoy life while you are managing and calculating every kobo, don't come crying to me. I warned you. The line went dead. Doris burst into tears, not from sadness, but from the sheer exhaustion of fighting for her own choice. John held her close, and as he did, he whispered something that would become their anchor in the storms ahead. "We'll measure us by our wedding day, but we'll measure ourselves by the life we build. And Doris, I promise you, we're going to build something they can't even imagine." The day of Doris and John's wedding arrived with the kind of simplicity that made Clara physically recoil when she saw the photos online. A small community hall in Ikeja, plastic chairs, not chiavari, no red carpet, just regular floor tiles. The cake was pretty but modest from a local baker, not the 10-tier monstrosity imported from South Africa like hers had been. Doris wore a beautiful wedding dress, but Clara could tell it was locally made, probably cost less than 200,000 naira. The horror. Clara screenshotted everything and sent it to their former classmates group chat with a single caption. "Some people are not serious. Look at this village convention they are calling a wedding. Poverty is truly a disease." The responses came flooding in. Laughing emojis, crying emojis. "Chai, this is what happens when you marry a man with empty pockets. The audacity to even post this online, Seth. I would rather stay single than accept this kind of disgrace." But Clara didn't stop there. She went live on Instagram, her face perfectly beat, sitting in her luxury apartment that she didn't yet know was about to be seized. Guys, I'm not one to talk about people, but I just have to address something. There's this thing going on now where people are romanticizing poverty. They will tell you love is enough, that a small wedding is wise, that you should marry potential. She laughed, that practiced influencer laugh. Let me tell you something. If a man truly loves you, he'll find the money. He'll borrow, he'll work extra jobs, he'll do whatever it takes to give you the wedding you deserve. Don't let any man gaslight you into accepting less. You're a queen, and queens don't do community hall weddings. The live video got 50,000 views, thousands of comments agreeing with her. Young girls in the comment section swearing they never settle for less. Clara felt powerful, vindicated, right. She didn't know that across town, Doris was watching that same video with tears streaming down her face while John held her. "Maybe they're right," Doris whispered, her voice broken. "Maybe I'm fooling myself. Maybe love isn't enough." John tilted her chin up gently, his eyes fierce with determination. "Doris, look at me. In 10 years, that woman mocking you won't remember this day, but we will. We'll remember that we started with integrity, that we didn't drown ourselves in debt trying to impress people who don't pay our bills. Let them laugh now. Our time is coming." 3 months after Clara's Instagram attack, the world as she knew it completely collapsed. The EFCC didn't just arrest Daddy Z, they dismantled his entire operation. The media had a field day. Banana Island big boy arrested for 2.8 billion naira fraud. The story was everywhere. Blogs, newspapers, primetime news. And Clara's face was right there beside his, the glamorous wife who'd flaunted wealth built on other people's suffering. The comment section that once worshipped her now tore her apart. She knew. They always knew. All that designer bag content was funded by fraud. She should be arrested too. Brands she'd partnered with immediately terminated their contracts. Her Instagram followers, once at 500,000, began dropping by the thousands daily. News outlets camped outside their Banana Island apartment until the day the bank came with a court order and eviction notice. Clara stood in the middle of her luxury living room, watching strangers catalog every piece of furniture, every appliance, every item that would be auctioned to recover a fraction of the stolen money. The Italian leather couch, tagged. The 85-inch television, tagged. Her collections of designer bags, shoes, and clothes, all tagged and loaded into trucks. She was allowed to keep only basic clothing and personal essentials. Everything else belonged to the banks now, to the creditors, to the victims her husband had destroyed. "Madam, you need to vacate the premises by 6 p.m. today," the bank official said, not unkindly, but firmly. Clara looked around the apartment that had been her pride, her content creation studio, her proof that she'd made it. Now it was just an empty shell being stripped piece by piece. She had nowhere to go. Her parents, who she'd barely spoken to in 2 years because they weren't sophisticated enough for her new lifestyle, lived in a cramped 2-bedroom flat in Surulere. The friends who'd hyped her wedding and envied her lifestyle had all gone silent, read receipts on, but no responses. She called her mother, hands shaking. "Mama, I need help." The words tasted like poison in her mouth. Her mother sighed heavily on the other end. "Come home, Clara. Come home and learn what real life looks like." At 6 p.m., Clara walked out of Banana Island carrying 2 suitcases of basic clothes, wearing no makeup for the first time in years, her carefully constructed world reduced to rubble. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of her fall. While Clara's world crumbled, Doris and John were building theirs brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Their 1-bedroom apartment in Ageje became their war room. Every morning at 5 a.m. they were awake. John left for his engineering job by 6:30 a.m., but not before they prayed together and reviewed their goals. Doris worked as a pharmacist at a busy hospital in Ikeja, often taking double shifts when the opportunity arose. Their lives weren't glamorous. They weren't posting breakfast photos or vacation countdowns. But something else was happening, something quiet, something powerful. Every month, without fail, they sat together with a notebook and budgeted every single naira. 30% to savings and investments, 20% to their small pharmaceutical supply business they'd started with 500,000 naira, 15% to rent and utilities, the rest carefully allocated to food, transportation, and modest living. No designer bags, no expensive restaurants, no keeping up with anyone. Just 2 people with a plan, executing it relentlessly. "John, we got another contract," Doris announced one evening, bursting through the door with excitement. Their pharmaceutical supply business had just secured a deal to supply medications to 3 private clinics. Profit margin 380,000 naira monthly. John lifted her off the ground, spinning her around their tiny living room. "This is it, Doris. This is how empires are built, not with borrowed money for one day of show, but with consistent effort nobody sees." By their 2nd anniversary, they'd saved 4.2 million naira and reinvested 2 million into expanding their pharmaceutical business. By year 3, John's innovative engineering solution for water purification in low-income areas caught the attention of an international NGO. They offered him a contract worth 15 million naira. Doris cried when he told her, not because of the money, but because she'd believed in him when the world called him insufficient. Year 4, they bought their first property, a modest 2-bedroom flat in Aja, not for showing off, but for renting out. Monthly income, 600,000 naira. Year 5, their pharmaceutical business had grown so much, they opened a small retail pharmacy. They hired 3 employees, young people like they once were, struggling but determined. They paid them well and treated them with dignity. 10 years, a decade of intentional living, disciplined saving, strategic investing, and unwavering partnership. Doris and John stood in the grand ballroom of the Echo Hotel, the same venue Clara had once dreamed of, but never actually had her wedding in, despite her boasts. Tonight wasn't about validation, it was about celebration, gratitude, and honoring the journey that had transformed 2 struggling graduates into millionaires with a combined net worth of over 200 million naira in assets and investments. The hall glittered with 300 guests, business partners, friends, family, and employees whose lives they touched. Doris wore an elegant emerald dress, custom-made but understated. John stood beside her in a perfectly tailored suit, his arm around his wife, his partner, his co-builder. On the screen behind them, a photo montage played, their small wedding 10 years ago, their tiny apartment, their first pharmacy, their struggles, their wins, their 3 beautiful children. "Ladies and gentlemen," John began, his voice steady and filled with emotion. 10 years ago, the world measured us by what we didn't have: a fancy wedding, a big car, designer labels, and they mocked us for it. But my wife, this incredible woman standing beside me, she saw something nobody else did. She saw potential. She saw partnership. She saw a future we could build together, not with borrowed money, but with our bare hands and relentless faith. He turned to Doris, taking her hands. Baby, you chose me when choosing me was the unpopular decision. When your mother doubted, when your friends laughed, when society said I wasn't enough, you said I was. And because you believed in us, we now own 4 properties generating 2.8 million naira monthly in rental income. We have a pharmaceutical distribution company serving over 50 hospitals across Lagos. We have investments in agriculture, tech startups, and real estate development. We have 3 children who will never know poverty because we refuse to perform wealth we didn't have. The applause was thunderous. Doris wiped tears from her eyes as John continued. But more than the money, more than the assets, you gave me something priceless. You showed me that a woman of substance doesn't demand a man's last kobo for validation. She partners with him to build an empire. Thank you for being my queen, not because I could afford a crown, but because together we forged one.
Among the catering staff hired for the event, moving quietly between tables with trays of hors d'oeuvres, was a woman whose hands trembled slightly as she worked. Clara had tied her hair in a simple bun, wore the black and white uniform provided by the catering company, and kept her head down. She'd been working these kinds of jobs for 2 years now, ever since her mother's health deteriorated, and the small provision store Clara had managed to open with borrowed money from a cousin had failed. Life had humbled her in ways she never imagined possible. Daddy Z was serving a 15-year prison sentence. All the properties had been seized and auctioned. The debts in her name had destroyed her credit completely. She'd moved back to her parents' cramped flat in Surulere, sharing a room with her younger sister, waking up at 4 a.m. to catch multiple buses to catering gigs that paid 8,000 naira per event. The designer bags were long gone, sold for a fraction of their worth to pay for her mother's medications. The Instagram account she'd once used to oppress others was now deactivated, the shame too heavy to bear. "Kate, Auntie Clara?" a voice said softly beside her. Clara's head snapped up. Standing there, holding a glass of champagne, was Doris. She'd somehow spotted Clara among the dozens of servers. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. What could she possibly say? "I'm sorry I mocked you. I'm sorry I called your wedding a village convention. I'm sorry I spent years making you feel inadequate while I was living a lie. I didn't know this was your event," Clara finally whispered, her voice cracking. I would have asked for a different assignment." Doris studied her for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, she smiled gently. "Clara, life has a way of teaching us what classrooms and parents cannot. I don't hold anything against you, truly. You were a product of what society told you to value. I hope you've learned what actually matters now." "I have," Clara said, tears streaming down her face, not caring any more about the mascara she wasn't even wearing. "I've learnt it the hardest way possible, Doris. I lost everything, everything. While you and John were building, I was performing. While you were investing, I was borrowing to impress people who disappeared the moment the money did. I mocked your wedding, but your marriage became an empire. I had the viral wedding, but my marriage was a fraud. I'm so sorry for everything." Doris reached out and gently touched Clara's arm. "The beautiful thing about life, Clara, is that it's never too late to start building something real. You are still young, you are still breathing, you can still choose differently." With that, Doris walked back to her celebration, leaving Clara standing there, forever changed by an encounter she'd never forget. As the night warmed down and guests began to leave, John took the microphone one last time. "Before we end this beautiful evening, I want to leave you all with something, especially the young people here.
Society will pressure you to perform wealth you don't have. It will tell you that your wedding day is more important than your marriage, that debt for validation is somehow honorable, that struggling together is shameful. Don't believe those lies. He paused, his voice growing more passionate. Build in private, invest in silence. Choose a partner who will work with you, not someone who will drain you to maintain appearances. Remember, a viral wedding lasts one day, but a solid marriage built on partnership, discipline, and shared vision creates generational wealth. We didn't have a 50 million naira wedding, but we have a 200 million naira life, and we're just getting started. The hall erupted one final time in applause. As Doris and John left that night, hand in hand, they passed by Clara, who was packing up catering supplies. Their eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The story had told itself. Dear viewer, thank you so much for watching till the very end. If this story touched your heart, challenged your perspective, or taught you something valuable about building real wealth versus performing fake wealth, please tap that like button. Drop a comment below sharing what lesson resonated most with you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, especially young people feeling pressured to keep up with social media lifestyles that are often just beautifully packaged lies. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Folktales by FP and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our deeply moving stories that don't just entertain, but transform how you see life, money, relationships, and success. Remember, your wedding is just one day, but your marriage, your character, and the legacy you build, that's forever. Choose wisely. See you in the next story. Stay blessed.